Alright, let's get started. First thing I want you to do for this activity is to click the drop down arrow on the new button for a part file, and we'll notice that the background is a gray. Let's get rid of that. Go to the Tools tab up at the top, choose Application Options, go to the Colors tab in this window, and instead of choosing Winter Night, if that's what it's already selected on, go to Presentation. Change your background to one color. Color scheme, presentation, background, one color. You get a nice white background. We can go ahead and apply that, and you'll see the background is white. Next, if we go to Sketch, we'll find that we want to have the Snap to Grid button selected, grid lines, minor grid lines, and axes all selected. Hit Close, or if yours isn't selected, you'll either have to hit Apply or OK. And then go to your document settings, go to Sketch, make sure that your X and Y snap spacings are set for a 1/16 of an inch or 0.0625 inches. Your grid display has 2 snaps per minor, and your major is every 8 minor lines. We'll say OK to this. Remember that OK also applies and closes your window. Under the 3D Model tab, we'll choose Create 2D Sketch or hit S on our keyboard. And in this case, I'm going to choose this plane, which is our YZ plane. Now, the YZ plane is probably the most common one that we'll use, but the others are the XY plane, the XZ plane, and I choose this one to show you that your sketch is now going to be on the right side. I only do that to show you that the sketch can be placed on any of these planes, because in the end we're just going to create a two-dimensional sketch for this. You'll notice that in my browser, Sketch 1 is now the only thing that's really highlighted, and that means that I've created a 2D sketch, and my sketch panels are now available. Notice that this ribbon now has new panels: draw, constrain, pattern, modify, so forth. Sketch tab is green and is apparent, whereas if I hit Finish Sketch, it's no longer there, and my view cube rotates back to an isometric view, also known as the home view. Now Sketch 1 can always be brought back up by double-clicking on it, and you'll notice that it rotates this view cube around. Doesn't really matter for what we're going to do. For this first thing, it's nothing more than setting us up to make the Automoblox body. So let's do that. We want to be sure that we use the snap spacing as appropriately as possible. And the first thing that it wants us to do is create a rectangle. And I'm going to choose a 2-point rectangle, which should be the default for you, but make sure that it is. My first point will be, I'll pick the origin. I'll drag it out. I need it to be 2 inches by roughly 1.25. I don't need to put in the dimensions because I'm snapping to the grid spacing, but get somewhere close to this. Just make the rectangle big enough. Go with fillet, and we want to make the first fillet 0.25 and choose this top right corner. I want to make the next fillet 0.75, and I want to choose the bottom right corner. Now, I can either select the 2 lines, or I can choose 0.5 for the bottom left corner, exactly on the corner point, and it should make it for me. But sometimes you miss ever so slightly, and it just selects the line. That's okay. Just pick the other line, and it should make it. And that's it. There's your first object. Once this is done, you hit Finish Sketch, and you'll see that it rotates it back into this weird view, but that's okay. Save the file by clicking on the Save button, and you'll notice that I have this folder called Practice. Now this folder was one that I created under my Student Inventor Files folder, which is in my Student Version folder. So under the Student Inventor Files folder, I have this Automoblox project, which we'll be using in a minute, and this Practice one. Under the Practice one, I want to call this Now you can throw your initials into that if you want to. You could give it some other name if you'd like, but as long as you know how to get back to it and it's saved in an appropriate place, you're good to go. We'll close this file and we'll start now with another standard IPT. Again, you can get to it by opening up this window, or you can click the drop-down box. I'll choose Part. This time I'll create a new 2D sketch and I'll put it on the YX plane. And I'll choose another rectangle. Now if I look at my activity, which I can come down here and click on it on the fly, I'll find that it wants me to sketch a rectangle, then fill out the corners before I extrude it. That's 3 steps that don't involve even a mention of dimensioning it. Then I select the top, I create a new sketch on that, draw and locate a rectangle, fill at its corners, and make sure that I then extrude it down the appropriate distance, and that I do 2 more rectangles on the front and back faces and extrude cut those the appropriate distances as well. Now this makes it look simple and quick, and it's not that hard, but you do have to reference another file, and that file is this 5.2b A for activity, student reference for SR, Automoblox T9 dimension drawing sheet. It looks like this. The second object on here is the passenger section. This is the Automoblox Body, if you will. And if you hold Control on your keyboard and scroll up with your wheel, or come down here to the bottom right corner and zoom in, you'll be able to see the dimensions a little clearer. Some of them are a little harder to read, like this 0.82, this 0.60, and maybe even for some of you this 0.57. But I'll call them out to you as we go. We're going to start by making this front face right here. It's 3.17 inches wide by 1.53 inches tall. Come back out here to Inventor, 2-point rectangle, and I'll draw it out. Now again, dimensions are 3.17 inches wide, 1.53 inches tall. 3.17 inches wide, 1.53 inches tall. Now to swap back and forth between those dimensions as I type them in, before I click the second point for my 2-point rectangle, all I have to do is hit Tab on my keyboard. Once I have that, I don't have to click the second point on my rectangle. I just need to make sure my mouse is where I want it to be. I'll hit Enter on my keyboard. Now, I have a tendency to use the number pad on my keyboard more than anything else. Once that's in place, all I have to do is fillet the corners. I got to look at my drawing sheet and see that those outside corners, there are 4 of them, and they have a radius of 0.30. Change this to 0.3, click on my 4 corners, close my 2D fillet, and that sketch is done. I'll finish the sketch, but before I do, I want to move some dimensions around just to show you that I can drag this guy down here, and I can drag this guy out here. Later we're going to add some more dimensions, so moving them might be useful for you, just for your own benefit. If you're okay with where they are and can read them, it's perfectly fine. Just make sure that nothing else is selected, and you can make sure of that by coming in on your keyboard and hitting the Escape button a few times, or right-clicking and finding the button around here that says Cancel, or the one that says OK. We'll finish the sketch, and then we'll extrude it the appropriate distance. Now what we find is that this body is 3.17 inches deep. So if this is my front face, then I want to go toward the back 3.17 inches. I also like to keep my sketches on the front faces of the object. Now for some reason, an inventor always wants to default by extruding toward us, which would mean that I'm coming from the back toward the front, and I don't want to do that. I want to go in direction 2 and go toward the back of my view cube. And I want to go by 3.17. So it's just as deep as it is wide. Now I could type in 3.17 here, or since I know that it's the same, I could start to use parametric modeling and tell this dimension to be the same as this dimension, which is currently described as D0. That way, if I ever change the width, the depth also changes. So I have this block, all right? All I've done at this point is I sketched a rectangle, I filleted the corners, and then I extruded it. Now I need to select the top of this part, create a new sketch, and then draw and locate a rectangle with filleted corners that represents the whole based on the appropriate measurements. Those measurements are all found on the T9 dimensioned drawing sheet. So this is the hole they're talking about. It has fillets with a radius of 0.2, and all 4 of them are the same. It's 1.98 inches wide. It's located approximately 0.6 inches from the right, and I'll show you how to do that and why I say approximately. And it is located 0.82 inches from the front edge on the top. Then I'll extrude cut as opposed to what I just did a second ago, which was extrude join, or to add material, and I will make it 1.07 inches deep or tall in this case because it's a cut that's going down in height. Once I extrude cut it, I'll move on to doing number 4, which is making the front and back opening. That means I need to place a sketch on the top. I can choose Create 2D Sketch and just click on that face. I could right-click on the face and choose New Sketch. Or, if I left-click on the face, a little flyout window comes up, and I can click on Create Sketch right here. Once this sketch is created, it automatically picks up any edges that are touching the sketch. And right now, those edges would be the top, right, front, back, and left edge. Notice that because this is curved, we only see this front edge as being right here. We don't pick up this curve on the top because it curves in the width and height direction. 2 dimensions that are only on the front and back faces. So, top face now has this sketch on it. We'll look straight on this face, and we will create a rectangle somewhere inside the boundary of these yellow lines, trying not to constrain it geometrically, like say to the midpoint of this line. And you'll notice that a little line shows up there showing that it's constrained. We don't want to do that, but we do want to be inside of here. And we'll make it as big as we want, as long as it stays inside the boundary. Right click, say OK, and start dimensioning away. This is 1.98, if I remember correctly. From this edge, right here, the right edge of the new square or rectangle that I've drawn, all the way over, not to this yellow line, but further, all the way over to this far right edge. Click there and you'll see that I can place this dimension and tell it that it is 0.6. Now, you would think that that means that it's 0.6 from here over to here. And if I place this dimension, it would get angry with me and tell me that I'm over constraining my sketch, and I would be Inventor doesn't need to know this dimension because it knows the other two, and it knows how wide this object already is. But notice that it says 0.590. So when PLTW made this, they decided that 0.6 was close enough. You could, if you wanted to, go in and make this dimension 0.595, and it would make it even on both sides. But you'll notice that you probably didn't even see that line move, and the human eye doesn't really see thousandths of an inch anyway, so leaving it at 0.6 is totally acceptable. Alright, so we have it located in width. We have the size of the rectangle in width. We now need the size of the rectangle in its depth, which is this dimension here. And that dimension, if you don't remember, is 1.59. And then the bottom edge is located 0.82 from the front. So I'll click on that dimension, 1.59. And I'll click this edge to this edge and call it 0.82. I'll right click and say OK. Clean up my dimensions just a little bit for my own benefit, no other reason. Choose Fillet and make 0.2 filleted corners. Everything looks good. I'll finish that sketch, and I'll now extrude this face, not going up, not going in this direction, but rather cutting it with this button. And you'll notice that it'll switch from being direction 1 to direction 2. But I don't want to go all the way through. I could tell it to go a certain distance. I could tell it to go to the next face or body, in which case it would choose the next face, which is the bottom, and it would still be going all the way through. To a selected face, the only thing I can select is this one. It's still going all the way through. Between two faces and planes, still going to make it go all the way through, or through all, which is useful if I want it to always go all the way through. In this case, I do want an actual distance, and I don't want it to be dimension D0. I want it to be something along the lines of 1.07. So either in this window right here or this one, 1.07. Now you may notice that I've been using this window and yours isn't there. This little arrow allows for that. Or you can use this flyout window and all these tools that are at your disposal. Everything that's here is also here. Alright, I have my dimensions, everything looks good, it's all extruded. I select OK. And you'll notice that over in my browser, Extrusion 1 has consumed Sketch 1, and Extrusion 2 has consumed Sketch 2. Well, let's take Sketch 1, and let's treat it like we do our siblings, hopefully better than some of you do, and we'll share what we've consumed with them. So, sharing this sketch allows me to be able to go back to this original sketch and do something else with it. Well, what I want to do with that sketch is add more to it. Now, I don't have to share it to add more to it, but to use what I add to it, I would have to share it. And what I want to add is the rectangle that represents this front cutout. Now, they don't give us any dimensions here, so we have to reference our T9 dimension drawing, and you'll notice this rectangle is 2.40 inches wide, located 0.39 from the right, and has filleted corners of 0.2. The height is 0.93, and it's located 0.3 from the top. So 2.4 and 0.93 is what I'm really looking for here, somewhere in between the boundaries of this already established rectangle. Again, 2.4, 0.93. Yep. Then I'll dimension to locate the side. It's is 0.39, and locate the top is 0.30. Now let me clean it up so that it looks a little bit more like what you see on the T9 dimension drawing sheet. I'll drag this dimension down. I'll drag this dimension over. Pull this one down to here, and I can even drag it out to the side. Pull this dimension over to here. I can drag it up if I'd like. And you don't need to do this, but I want to be able to point out dimensions to you very clearly. I also need to dimension the corners for their fillets, and remember that they are 0.2. I already have 0.2 selected. Corner for each one of these. And if it moves any of your dimensions, feel free to move them back if you want to. It's now done. Finish my sketch. I can now extrude. Choose this one, cut with it, and send it back the appropriate distance of 0.57. You can find that on the T9 dimension drawing sheet right here. Notice that the sketch is still visible, so I'm going to right click and turn off the visibility. Now you could have created a new sketch on that face and then drawn everything needed, but why? You already have to do it on the back. Don't do it on the front if you don't have to. Create a new sketch on the back side. Draw in its rectangle. This is very similar to what we just did on the front side, only we want to give it its dimensions, which on the T9 drawing sheet, it's a little bit further down. They're going to tell us it's 2.50 wide by 1 inch tall. All right. 2.50 by 1 inch. And I want to dimension it so that it's 0.27 from the top and 0.34 from the right. 0.27 from the top and 0.34 from the right. Clean up my dimensions a little bit so you can see them very clearly. And then I have some fillets. Still 0.2, and it's all 4 of them that have that radius. Fillet, 0.2, corner, finish my sketch, extrude it, cut it, and if I remember correctly, this also goes 0.57 inches. I'll say OK, and my T9 body appears to be done, or at least I've done all of the things that they needed for everything up through step 4. Now I need to save it, and then they would ask me to open it back up again. So let's go ahead and do this. They want me to emboss the vehicle model name, which in this case is a T9, and we're going to put that on the side of the passenger model. Now it's a good practice to go ahead and save your file, since you probably haven't done that yet. We'll hit the Save button, and now instead of putting it in the Practice folder, go up and choose Automoblox Project, and call this, as they point out to you, Passenger Section with your initials. Now, don't put the words your initials, put your actual initials. So, Passenger Section, in this case, I'm going to put some spaces between all these because I like spaces. AWD for my initials, and I'll hit save. Alright, they want us to put sketch on this face, place our text, and then use the emboss tool. So walking through their steps, create a sketch, use the text tool, write the name of the Automoblox model, place the sketch in the appropriate location on the vehicle. They don't give us any dimensions. We don't see any dimensions on here for it. So we're just going to go with what we think is the best. Sketch on, well, which face? They don't really identify it, but it sure does look like it's the bigger opening. So I'm going to say the right side face. Place our sketch there. Use the text tool under the draw panel. Text, and I'll place it somewhere in this corner. Now you could just click or you can drag out a box. It's totally up to you, but it opens up a new window, and you can put in T9. Now, it's not quite like how theirs looks. Notice their 9 is a bit smaller. There are a few things that you could do here. You could make the T bigger than the 9, or you could make the 9 smaller. You could place 2 different texts, but that's a waste in my opinion. So let's go with the T being the size that it is. We'll go with 0.12 here, and we could make this 9 a bit smaller and highlight it and then change its size. Now, there's already some default drop-down sizes, but let's just go with one of those and choose 0.1 inch. Alright, so we see that we already have it properly sized. If I highlight both of them, size goes away because they're 2 different sizes. But I do want to go ahead and highlight them both and say bold. Alright, then I'll say OK. When I say OK, what's going to happen is that text suddenly appears, and the box is obviously way bigger than I need it to be. If I right click and say OK, I'm now out of the text mode, and I can take this box and shrink it if I want to, but don't make it smaller than the actual text. I can also grab the text and drag it around where I want it to be. I like where it is, right there. I'll bring it down a little bit. If you notice, they don't show you yet, but you'll be making a groove through here in a few minutes. So we're going to go ahead and just drag it down. If we need to move it later, we can always come back to this sketch and adjust for it. I'll finish that sketch. And now I'm going to use the emboss feature to create raised letters, and I'll use a depth of 0.02 inches. So emboss, it wants me to choose a profile, so select a profile or text. You'll notice down here in the bottom corner it also says that, and it lets me pick different things for the profile. I want the letters, and I want it to be 0.02 inches that I emboss. And emboss means that it brings it out away from the object, but the emboss tool also allows you to do an engrave and to do kind of both, emboss and engrave. I want to do 0.02, and I want it to come out away from the body. I'll click OK, and voila, there it is, embossed. The next thing that it would have you do is paint the surface. You'll also notice that it's already got this grain color to it, and they haven't really told you how to do that yet. So let me show you that you can pick a few things. Up here in the little drop down that says default next to the right of that first color wheel, it allows me to pick different types of model colors. In this case, we're going to start typing on our keyboard the word wood. Let's see what we get. So wood pops up down here. We've got white ash java, white oak. Oh look, yellow pine. Let's choose that. All right, not bad, not bad. Doesn't quite look like what they have. Let's choose something a little different. Let's go with Wood painted white doesn't sound good. Well, you can really choose almost anything that you want, because in the end, it's just for your own benefit. You want to make it look polished brush? Go for it. But I would recommend that we go with something that looks a little more like wood, just to make it match kind of the idea of this activity. So you choose whatever you'd like to for this. I'm going to go with cherry wood. Oh, I like that. Okay. But the T9 kind of disappears in there, just like it did with our default generic material. Well, if I do like they say, and I paint the surface of the embossed letters by changing the face color style, then I can select the surface of the letters, right-click, select properties, and choose black from the list of colors. Okay, fine. I'll right-click on it, choose properties, go to what I want, black. Oops. There we go. And I'll say OK. I can also choose this face, properties, black. And it paints just that one face. Makes it pop a little bit. Now, one of the things that they don't tell you about in all of this is how to make that groove. So let's do that. If you look at the T9 dimension sheet and you zoom out a little bit, you'll see that on the right-hand side, they show you as part of that sketch that you can make this little cutout, and we haven't done that yet. So, if we go back to our original sketch, sketch 1, we double-click on it, and we come into here on the right-hand side, and we say, make a rectangle that's located somewhere over here. Don't want it to be constrained to anything other than this edge. And I'll make that rectangle so that it has the same dimensions. Well, it looks like it's going to be 0.06 inches deep by 0.06 inches tall, and it's located 0.3 from the top. All right. Well, let's come back into our inventor. 0.06 by 0.06 the inside, and I will dimension it from the top so that it's 0.3, I believe is what they said. Yep. And there it is. From here, I can choose a couple of different things. I could trim this, and then, let me show you what happens. Trim. It says that, oh, you've got some dimensions that are applied to that. You don't want to trim that away. Okay. I could get rid of those dimensions and still trim. But if I finish my sketch and I go back to this original extrusion, the profile that I want to select doesn't have to include this part. Now, to deselect that, I held Shift and clicked on that closed profile. And it selected everything around it. We'll say OK. And it made it for me. But if you'll notice, there's also one on the other side. So, how do I make that work? Well, I think the easiest, quickest way to go about doing that is that since they're on the same side and they're with the exact same dimensions, when I worked with the sketch, I could go in and draw a line, make it a construction one, find the midpoint of the top edge, click, and just drop down a vertical line. Doesn't need to be any particular distance long, as long as it's vertical. That's what we're looking for. Turn off my construction, and then mirror under pattern. I can select, and I'll move to the left, it selects anything that it crosses, or I can move to the right and it selects anything that it's encompassing. So it selects just the square. My mirror line will be that construction line that I chose, and when I apply, it moves it over to this side. I can hit Done, Finish Sketch. The sketch is there, but the extrusion didn't account for it. So, just like before, Profile, Shift, Select, and say OK. It's all done. It's good to save again. If you haven't already saved it, be sure that you do call it the proper thing. Hit your Save button, close your file, and move on to the next thing.